All right, well, I guess we'll get started today. So if you're streaming with us, apologies. I mean, not that I would have changed anything. All right, we're going to be in thank you, gentlemen. Genesis 18 today. Hey, Jerry. Good to see you. Glad you're back. How are you? Good. Good. Missed you. Yeah, glad you're safe. Yeah. It's good to see everybody else, too. Wow. So one of the things I wanted to mention, I was listening to some videos about this and some other stuff over the week. And one guy brought up something that I found just very interesting, is there are stories in the Bible that we are mostly used to because depending upon, how long you have been in a religious community, a Christian community, yeah, I'll say it that way. These are stories you've just at one point or another heard, if not, a dozen or 2 dozen times, at least 6. So you know that they're there. You may not ever look back at them again. But because they are a part of the canon and you know them and you're familiar with them, they are no longer weird or odd. They no longer make you go, wait, what did that say? And I think this is one of those stories where we are so commonly used to it. It's a story we know, Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom is referred to a couple times in the New Testament by Jesus. But if you were to come upon the story and you've never read it before, it's a unique story. It's an odd story. Now, for whatever reason, I think maybe because it's the canon, maybe because it's about God, that we don't want to call it unique or odd, but it is. And I just find that interesting in my own odd, interesting way. So we're going to start in verse 13 and 14, where this conversation is being had between Abraham and these 3 men about Sarah having a son. So they create this meal. Then while they are talking, they have this conversation telling Abraham that Sarah is going to have a child. Abraham laughs, and she states the fact that she's just old. She's worn out. She's like a worn out piece of leather. Abraham is the same way. Her Lord, her Sir, whatever you want to call it. Will I now have this pleasure? And so the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? Now I want you to notice, this is the Lord saying this to Abraham. Sarah's not a part of the conversation. In terms of proximity, it's the Lord and Abraham talking. And the Lord says to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, will I really have a child now that I am old? And then what's the statement say? For those of you that may have your Bibles open. Is anything too hard for Yahweh? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son. Does anything strike you interesting about that? Is anything too hard for Yahweh, for the Lord? Now, one of the other challenges of knowing one of these stories is you know it, maybe in some cases so well, that there are these flags you don't see, these very interesting statements that are made that maybe you may not notice. What is happening with that statement? And why would that statement be made there? Again, this is the Lord talking to Abraham. Is anything too hard for the Lord?
Well, it appears to be a rhetorical question.
Right.
Where it's more statement question.
Right. Nothing's too hard for the
But
Lord.
it assumes some knowledge or basis in that fact. That Abraham would have to possess on some level this knowledge. No, that comes from the Lord.
Right.
And,
Right.
we only get small stories.
Yes.
We don't see the whole
Yes.
existence of Abraham,
Yes.
All this has been passed down
Yes.
over
Yes.
the years. But how much did Abraham know the Lord? He's talked about as the father of faith, and he had this amazing faith, but what did he know?
Yeah.
And maybe that's where his faith comes from, because he didn't know a lot.
Yeah. 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 So after we hit this question, that may be some of our class today, because I have watched a lot of videos, and that's a very cool topic. So what would be too hard for the Lord here? I mean, what is the topic of conversation? Sarah is going to have a child. Now, if, say you're a couple in your 70s or 80s, and someone comes up and says, hey, you're going to have a child, and what would the wife possibly do? What would the husband possibly do? You've lost your mind. You're an idiot. So what would be too hard for the Lord in this particular setting? That Sarah could conceive, that Abraham can help her conceive, right? I mean, let's be particular, that he could help her conceive, and that she could conceive, and that she could carry for 9 months, and she could have a child. So it's not this thing where, a little bit like Mary, where, your son will be conceived of by the Holy Spirit, but it's, they've got to have sex, and then the seed, and then the conception, and then the growth for 9 months. And then she's got to deliver this thing. Is anything too hard for the Lord? And so this is a question again for Abraham. Now, who is listening?
Well, the NLT says she left silently to herself.
Okay.
But the Lord heard it anyway.
There you go. So it may be, and to Doug's point, that this was in response to Abraham telling her this as opposed to her hearing this conversation. So is anything too hard for the Lord? Can he not cause that whole process to happen? Now, to Doug's point, and I don't know if you've ever wondered this, I have. My, at whatever level, my logical, and I'm going to use this very fluidly in air quotes, my engineering mind. Why did Abraham, because he wasn't Yahweh whenever Abraham gets called. He's just God. Why would Abraham believe him? Why follow this Elohim? What proofs did he offer? And I was wrong. Genesis 12:1, then Yahweh had said to Abraham. So yeah, he is called that. At least here he is. Does anybody have any other translation of that that's different? Okay. So they're all Yahweh. So what would cause him to believe, to actually follow? Because if you think about what are the three things that he calls Abraham to do? Do what?
Physically impossible for a human.
Yes. It's not possible. I mean, it's not even the fact of, try real hard and take a year and get fit or whatever. It's not a thing. Can't happen. In fact, as Sarah pointed out, I'm like a worn out piece of leather. It's just not going to happen, and Abraham's the same way. So in Genesis, yeah, Jerry.
How
Hadn't they been waiting like forever to have children and not had any? And after that much time went by, it probably shocked them
Yeah.
very hard. Like
Yeah.
worse than anything.
And how important were children to women at this time?
Well, God had promised him he'd be the father of many nations.
Yeah.
And he just probably didn't understand that.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that without any kids.
Right.
80 years or 100 years.
Right. And in fact, I don't know from Genesis 12, Genesis 18, how much time it was. Well, yeah, I do. From the time he promises descendants till Isaac is born is give or take 25 years. Quarter of a century. From promise made to promise completed. I'm not sure where Genesis 18 falls into that. So when you go to Genesis 12, what are the three things that God, or the one thing that, I guess you'd say two things, that God tells him to do and then promises to him? Genesis 12. And this may be something you've never thought through. You've just never, you've never considered this.
Native country.
Yep.
It says, I will make you a great nation.
Yep. Those are two things. Leave what you know. Leave your home. Leave your father's house. Leave his servants. Leave your gods. Leave everything. And I'm going to make you a great nation.
Bless those who curse those who treat you with contempt.
Yeah. Those who come after you, I'm going to go after them. Those who help you out, I'm going to take care of them too. And again, to Doug's point, this isn't like this happened within, a week. I'm sure it took a lot longer. And there are also ideas here where Abraham doesn't immediately leave. He takes a little longer. There's other places where it talks about it. And in fact, he didn't leave his father's family or his father. He took Terah with him. And in fact, Terah died in Haran, I think. So leave your native country and your relatives and your father's family and go to the land that I will show you. Didn't tell him where he was going. I will make you a great nation, a man that doesn't have children, and a man that's pretty close to the age of not being able to do that. So Abraham departs, and Lot goes with him. Abraham was 75 when he left Haran. And he, of course, took his wife, his lot, and his wealth. So we obviously cannot answer this today, but what would cause a man to, if it is the case, that I understand it is, that there are other Elohim, that why would he trust this one? Why do this with this one? Because he doesn't offer him anything in terms of right now. He offers him a great nation, a really big family. And that's not going to happen for another, well, if Isaac's not for 25 years, I don't know, 50, 60 years? It's going to be almost another century before this big nation happens. So just something for you to think about and consider. Why would he do that?
Paul say, maybe in Galatians,
Yeah.
that Abraham didn't even see this. He didn't see the outcome.
Right. Yeah.
Something that was promised to him, but he never really saw it. He saw Isaac.
Right.
That was his experience of the multitude of nations.
Yeah. Great point. And God asked him to kill him. So he did not even see remotely the outcome of this promise that God gives to him. So not only from this question, is anything too hard for the Lord, but can God take a 75-year-old man? And I think I'd heard that Sarah was about 10 years younger than him, a 65-year-old woman, and then 30 years advance, and they're going to have this child. And not only have this child, but then the child's going to have a child who, through 4 women, is then going to have 13 kids. And then that's then going to create the ultimately this great nation. Is anything too hard for the Lord, for Yahweh? And then he specifically tells him, next year I'm going to come back and Isaac will be here. So verse 17 and 18, I guess we can start verse 16. Then the men got up from their meal and looked out towards Sodom. And as they left, Abraham went with them to send them on their way. Should I hide my plan from Abraham? The Lord asked. For Abraham will certainly become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed through him. I have singled him out, so that he will direct his sons and their families to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just. And then I will do for Abraham what I have promised. So I have this question that's very curious to me, and I haven't broken any dirt yet on what the possibility is. So why connect the destruction of Sodom with the plans for and through Abraham? Should we keep this from him? Because he's going to be the father of a great nation. What does the destruction of Sodom have anything to do with God's plans through and with Abraham?
It's a dividing line. I mean, he's establishing what his truth, his justice, his righteousness, and what it's going to entail. Abraham's going to learn it. Abraham's going to teach it to his children.
Right.
Those and if he
Teach
does,
what about to happen.
as has been promised.
Yeah.
This is what happens if you don't.
To the non-blessed.
To the non-righteous. To those
Right,
that don't practice
right.
righteousness.
Right.
This is the outcome. So
Right.
he's demonstrating.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Also, notice he makes a statement in verse 19. I have singled him out so that he will direct his sons and his families to keep the way of the Lord. So Abraham has literally been singled out, which is kind of an interesting, big-time foreshadowing to what the church is supposed to do. The church is singled out. You know, the very idea of the church, the ecclesia, is to call out. So I have singled him out. And ultimately his people, the church, will be singled out to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just. And then I will do for Abraham all that I have promised. And I don't know, I really love the point that Abraham never saw the promise that God made to him, that I will make you into a great nation. He never realized that. In fact, he only saw one of those people. Well, that's probably not true, because I think later on is he still alive with Jacob? With Jacob and Esau? Yeah, we can look that up later. I couldn't remember if he was still there for Jacob and Esau's birth or not. So the Lord told Abraham, verse 20. And I've shared with you guys this many times over the last couple of years, but if you've got a thought, you don't have to raise your hand. Just say, "Hey, Andy," and blah blah blah. Yeah, Linda.
I don't ever remember studying this particular thing, or I don't know it.
Yeah.
Was any of Lot's family in the genealogy of Christ?
I don't think so. It's bizarre you ask that, because I was just watching a video of a guy who has like the breakdown, and because he is Abraham's nephew, I don't think he is, because he's from, a different Abraham, and he's over here. He's a different section of family. Yeah. That's a good question. Yeah.
21 is always a little confusing.
Yeah.
Going down to see if their actions are wicked.
Yeah.
Or as wicked as I have heard. I want to know.
Yeah.
He doesn't.
Yeah.
He knows everything.
There's I don't know, there's probably about 36 things in the Bible that have to be rhetorical. If what we understand about God is true, they have to be rhetorical. Because he either does know or he doesn't. And if he doesn't, he's not omniscient. If he does, then it's rhetorical. Yeah, Ty?
I was taking that one as he does know, but it's more of a, I'm going to see if they are actually going to push it or if they'll stop and change.
Oh, okay.
Like, I'm going to go down there myself and see if they're going to back off or if they're going to keep pushing.
Yeah.
I may be way off, but that's the way I
Yeah.
was
Well, that's one of the ones that confuses me, outside of if it's just straight up, rhetorical. But the other one that, I don't know, it's just odd to me, and I may be on a boat by myself, is it's not so much what is done or said, it's just that it's there, and it's odd. Verse 15, Sarah was afraid, and she denied it, saying, I didn't laugh. But the Lord said, yeah, you did. And we just move on. It's just weird to me. It's a weird flow for my brain, because it's like there's nothing there other than I didn't. Yeah, you did. And then we just kind of move on.
I still think, I look at this and I see it as he's establishing, essentially having a trial, really, is what it comes down to. And all things must be established by 2 or more witnesses.
Right.
He's bringing there's 3 men with
That's true.
right? So they're
That's
going
true.
down as witnesses to what has happened before judgment be issued.
Yeah.
That's the way I think.
Yeah.
It's like, he knows.
Yeah.
He's going as witness to.
Right. No, that's a great point. I hadn't considered that, because while they go down, they leave these two. Just call them messengers of Yahweh. They leave, or at least the conversation happens. They leave, and then the Lord stays. Verse 20. I've heard the great outcry from Sodom and Gomorrah. So, verse 22, the other men turned and headed toward Sodom, but Yahweh remained with Abraham. And they then, of course, had this very long conversation. Abraham approached him and said, as a result of hearing this conversation, will you sweep away both the righteous and the wicked? Again, one of the things that I was learning about this is this term righteous, and I'm still kind of processing this idea, that when we hear righteous today, especially as Christians, it may be a whole different wording and terminology and meaning and all those kind of things than what was said then. Because this Hebrew word seems to be just good people. And they're not people that are doing wrong. They're not people who are doing corrupt things. They're just good people. As opposed to righteous. Because when we think of righteous, what are some of the ideas that you think of when you hear the word righteous? And I would assume that within our brain is Christ and the cross and the church and living righteously. They didn't have that here. There was no Christ. There was no church. There was none of that stuff. So as opposed to good, upstanding people, will you sweep away good people with corrupt people? Will you just put them in one big bag and toss them? And so then they go through this line, and this is another one of those things that you may not find interesting, but my brain goes here pretty immediately. So with these numbers, the messengers go to the city. Abraham and Yahweh discuss the fate of the city. And these are what these numbers mean. 50 is freedom, so will you give freedom for 50 people? Let's say there's 50 people in this whole city. Will you will you spare this city for 50 people? Will you give them freedom, the whole city? 45 is grace. Will you have grace if it's just 45 out of this whole city? 40 is transition or test, which you know all the 40s in the Bible. Easily understood there, transition or test. 30 is divine order. Will you give the order with freedom and grace for 30 people? 20 is provision and blessing. And then 10, of course, is completion. So now, I don't know if those numbers with those meanings were intended for these. I just always found it interesting that he starts with 50, and you just have this consistent, how about 50? Yes, I will not destroy them for 50. And then verse 28, suppose there's 45 righteous people rather than 50. I will not destroy it for 45. He pressed his request further, verse 29. Suppose there's 40. I will not destroy it for 40. Please don't be angry, my Lord. And their Lord is Sir. It's not Yahweh. Please don't be angry with me, Sir. Abraham pleaded, what about 30 righteous people, good people are found? I will not destroy it for that. Abraham said again, verse 31, since I have dared to speak to you, sir, let me continue. Suppose there's 20. Lord said, I will not destroy it for 20. Lord, please don't be angry with me again. What about 10? And the Lord replied, I will not destroy it for the sake of 10. When Yahweh had finished the conversation with Abraham, he went on his way, and Abraham returned to his tent. So after we walk through this on a pretty surfacey level, and again, I know you know the story. This is an odd story. It's just, to me, it is odd and weird, just in terms of, because they go there, what is Yahweh and these two messengers' purpose for going there? And there's really, seemingly, there's two. No, I mean going to see Abraham. Like they're passersby, and Abraham goes out to meet them. And it becomes this thing. So what does it seem like they're, if they were there on purpose, what are their two reasons? Or let me take those back. What are their reasons? Right. Yeah. So hospitality kind of started the whole thing. How interesting is that?
They were headed Sodom and Gomorrah when they went.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for that. That's really interesting. Hospitality started this whole interplay. So they announce what's going to happen through Sarah. They have that whole conversation, and both her trust, her advancement, her belief, her faith, whatever you want to call it, confidence is really tested, as is Abraham's. And then they go from that, and that's why I think this is so odd, they go from that to, should we tell him what we're going to do to Sodom? So it's almost as if it's going to happen. And yet this advocate, this helper, kind of what Christ is called in Hebrews, comes in and says, am I getting this right? You're going to destroy all of Sodom. What if there's like 100 people that are good people? You're going to destroy it for them? And then you have this whole conversation. And Abraham, if you will, a kind of a foretaste of Christ, Abraham is able to talk Yahweh down from destroying them and then 50 people down to 10. I will not destroy this wicked place if you find 10 good people that are there. How interesting.
Now I'm jumping right down to
Yeah?
9. But God had listened to Abraham's request and kept Lot safe.
Yeah.
I didn't see any mention of Lot up above. Abraham
Well-
doesn't say anything about Lot.
No, and that's a good point. Lot is let's see. Lot is oh goodness, where is he? Chapter 14. Yeah, he's not in chapter 18, but he's in chapter 14 where Abraham goes with his army, so to speak, and rescues him. So he's mentioned there, and then he doesn't come back in till 19. Sodom actually going down. So, well, next week we'll get into chapter 19. Yeah, and we'll go from there. I know this may get old, but if any of you guys have topics you want to study, then let me know, and I'll gladly do that. And again, otherwise you get what I find interesting.